the amazing Amber Brock-Fabel, who at the ripe old age of 17 founded and directed the South Australian Youth Forum, a platform for young people to engage directly with the decision makers on pressing issues such as education, mental health and sustainability. Over the past months, members of the forum have been meeting to discuss what safety truly means for children and young people. We welcome Amber and her panel of forum members to the symposium, and we really look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Firstly, thank you, Harley and Patricia, for their beautiful welcome to country. And I too would like to acknowledge we're meeting on the traditional and unceded lands of the Kaurna people, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Thank you to Leslie, Leah and the team at the Australian Centre for Child Protection, and thank you to Charlie for using your platforms today to amplify an issue of such urgent importance. Please note that we will be speaking on heavy topics surrounding family, domestic, child and sexual violence, so we do not mind at all if you need some space outside. My name is Amber Brock-Fabel, and I'm the founding director of the South Australian Youth Forum, and honoured to serve as the 2025 Young Australian of the Year for South Australia. I started the South Australian Youth Forum when I was 17, back in 2021, with the aim of creating space for my voice and the voices of my peers to be heard at decision-making tables we're too often excluded from. 4 years later, we've grown into the largest youth-led advocacy body of its kind in the state. We've knocked down locked doors and kept them open for others to follow. At its heart, our mission remains simple: to ensure young people, particularly those under the age of 18, who currently have no formal say over their own lives and futures, are given the right to be heard. Too many conversations happen about us, without us, and over our own heads. We may not hold the titles of doctor or professor, or even a university degree or school completion, but what we bring is just as vital: the lived experience of what it means to be a young person today. And yet, in rooms where decisions about child safety and child protection are made, our voices are still too absent. This year's National Child Protection Week's theme is every conversation matters, shifting conversation to action. Seeing this room be full of people, not just talking about young people, but choosing to be here today to listen to us, fills me with immense hope that we can continue creating spaces where young people and children are truly empowered and where their voices and agency shape the decisions that impact their own lives. Shortly, you'll hear from 5 incredible SA Youth Forum members: Sienna, Raghu, Lachlan, Holly and Abinav, who have chosen to stand up here today with such strength to share their own words with you. They will then join me for a panel discussion where we will explore what an ideal world could look like. I also acknowledge the contributions of SA Youth Forum members, Seb and Hayley, for their insights and support in preparing us for today. Over the past month, we've worked closely with Leah and the Australian Centre for Child Protection to develop our own call for change through a series of focus groups. We'll share these insights during the panel, and we hope you will not only listen, but walk beside us in this urgent conversation. We all have a role to play in protecting children, whether in schools, in homes, or in our own communities. Because in the end, the measure of how well we protect children will not be found in our policies, but in whether young people can look back and say, "You heard us and you stood by us." Thank you. And I'll now pass over to our first SA Youth Forum speaker, Sienna.
How Housing, or lack of it, has been a topic in politics and the media for decades. We hear promises, plans, and policies rolled out year after year, yet the reality remains that there is still no real viable solutions for young people who find themselves without a safe place to live. I don't speak about this from the perspective of statistics, research papers, or political talking points. Instead, I speak about it from my own life because I have experienced homelessness. I have felt what it is like to fall through the cracks of a system that was meant to support me, and I have witnessed firsthand the failure of agencies that were supposed to provide stability, safety, and care. When people talk about housing, it is too often reduced to the idea of four walls and a roof. But for those of us who have lived through homelessness, housing is so much more than that. Housing is safety. It is knowing that you can close your eyes at night without fearing where you are. It is security, the foundation that allows you to build up your next steps in life. It is the chance to rebuild, to create routines, to heal, and perhaps most importantly, housing means not carrying the constant stress and exhaustion of wondering where you'll be tomorrow, or whether that place will be safe, stable, or even available at all. Every person who has experienced homelessness carries trauma, some of it because of the constant moving, the insecurity, the constant fear of not having somewhere safe to go, or the way we are treated, pushed aside, or ignored by the very systems and institutions that claim to exist for our protection. Some of it comes from the way society chooses not to see us, reducing us to a stereotype rather than recognising us as people with dreams, potential, and worth. Unless we create real solutions that go beyond temporary fixes, that trauma will not go away. It will compound, shaping the future of countless young people who remain stuck in cycles of survival rather than being given the tools, the security, and the opportunity to thrive. Housing is not just a basic human need. Instead, it is the foundation upon which every part of a young person's life is built. Without it, nothing else is possible. So when we talk about homelessness, let us stop pretending that short-term band-aids are enough. Let us stop viewing housing as an optional extra or a privilege that some people are lucky to have. Safe and stable housing is a right, and until we treat it as one, young people will continue to be failed by a system that tells us to prepare for the future while refusing to give us the chance to have one. We need change. I'll now pass over to Raghu.
Racism. Australia has had a history of racism, from the White Australia policy to recent neo-Nazi movements. The history of this nation has been intertwined with discriminatory values. This adversely affects young people, evoking severe psychological harm while tearing at the social fabric of our community. The fact that we see each other as black, brown, or white, rather than as humans or as brothers and sisters, it's a sign that our differences have been vilified rather than the fact that it unites us. Those ideas plague the next generation, creating a horrible environment where belonging is something that must be proved and is yet still constantly questioned. Born in Malaysia, I spent the last 7 years of my life living in Australia. Where do I fit in, I ask you? At every opportunity, the color of my skin and not the content of my character has been a source of judgment used to discriminate. We like to think we're on top of racism, that we aren't like other nations. Unfortunately, that's only the case if you aren't facing it. The system isn't just failing, there isn't a system to begin with. At the age of 11, I realized that the very people I was supposed to trust to protect me had no answers. They pushed paper, they pushed procedures, but they didn't push for change. And I was left to carry a weight a child should never carry. That is why I stand here today, not just for myself, but for every young person who has been indirectly told their pain is too complicated, too inconvenient, or too uncomfortable to deal with. Every day we delay, another young person is told that who they are doesn't matter, and I will not accept that. We should not accept that, and I refuse to be silent about it. We need change. I'll now pass over to Lachlan.
One thing that has been lost in the current conversation about domestic violence is child abuse. Domestic violence is often conflated with intimate partner violence, but unfortunately we know that almost as many people have suffered abuse as children. In 2021, an estimated 2.7 million Australians had been victims of childhood abuse, 1.5 million being physical and 1.9 million being sexual. Unfortunately, we know that the vast majority of victims will never report their abuse to police. 84% of girls and 99% of boys have never reported their sexual assault to police. This means that the cycle of abuse that is so common is often never reported or broken. The thing that equally concerns me from this reporting by the Australian Bureau of Statistics is the millions more who have been the victims of emotional abuse, financial abuse, and child neglect, who go unreported in these studies. Whilst the government has very recently passed a new amendment to criminalise coercive control, all of the reporting about this new amendment has been specific to intimate partners, and it does not cover similar abuse against children. Children are even more vulnerable to these forms of abuse, and I have seen in people very close to me how it destroys children. The self-doubt it causes in every action, the pressure it places on friendships, and how difficult it makes meaningful connections down the road. The effect of this abuse is felt for decades and affects every facet of life. The plight of children suffering from coercive control, emotional abuse, and child neglect cannot be put in the too hard bucket. We know the issue. We need change. I now pass to Holly.
Hi everyone, I'm Holly. I'm 16 years of age and I'm in year 11. However, last year I was 15 and in year 10. He was 17 and in year 11. My boyfriend at the time's close mate. His funny comments covered with undertones of malicious intent suddenly made sense when I was comforting his girlfriend. We weren't close, but as her eyes filled with tears, I understood why what he said made me so uncomfortable. Together, united, we seek to get justice. Today I'm 16 and in year 11. He's 18 and in year 12. I still seek the justice that we were previously promised. He received a slap on the wrist of injustice. The system failed to protect us. Lost and forgotten remain the memories that haunt us. I still see him walk through the halls, the faint sound of his apology ringing. I don't stand alone in this injustice. We stand silenced. Silenced by a system that cares more about reputations than repercussions. We need change. I will now invite Abinav to speak.
When we talk about family, domestic, and sexual violence, the focus often falls on what happens behind closed doors, but the reality is its impact doesn't stop at the home. Children and young people often carry the weight of this trauma into every other part of their lives, and I have seen this firsthand. At school, it shows up in ways that unfortunately teachers can easily misread. It could be things as difficulty concentrating, could be sudden drops in grades, it could be a constant tiredness, it could be kids sleeping in class. And for some, school is supposed to be a place of safety, but for others, it's another place where often children and students feel isolated and essentially unable to connect with their peers who simply can't understand what they're going through at home. And socially, these young people often struggle to build trust, to build friendships, or to simply feel like they belong in what's supposed to be an inclusive environment. Many withdraw completely, and others act out in ways that only deepen the stigma that surround them. The violence that they experience at home teaches them to see the world as unpredictable and unforgiving. And these effects aren't short-term, as many of us know. They're cycles of trauma, as my friends mentioned. They transition into adulthood, and that simply means high risks of bad mental health, could be substance abuse, and it could be they themselves perpetrating violence in future intimate partner relationships. So when we think about child protection, especially in our National Week, we need to think a bigger picture than just keeping kids safe at home. It's about making sure schools and community groups such as sporting clubs, etc., are really places where kids can show up, and these places are trauma informed and they're supportive, often to the invisible pains that these kids are experiencing. And if we ignore the way that family, domestic, and sexual violence shapes a child's world outside of the place where the abuse occurs, then we're only ever seeing half the picture. We need change. I'll pass back to Amber now.
Amazing friends. Thank you so much for standing up here today and sharing your stories. Very powerful insights, and the time you spent working with each other and Leah to come up with our call for change as well. I have a few questions for all of you. So starting us off, what does change look like for you? It could be in schools, in communities, in the ideal world. Should we start down there with you, Lachlan?
Go on, I can start us off. So I think for me, the changes that we wanted to see about coercive control was very simply expanding the current legislation that has just been passed to include children. I'm aware that legally there's going to be a couple of changes to it due to the legal differences between an adult and a child, but children are equally vulnerable to coercive control, and it can't be something that we just ignore. And then additionally, given how low the reporting rates are for child abuse, we need to seriously consider alternatives to the legal system that can be used to provide assistance to children. We know the long-term effects that come from child abuse, and we can't just leave the 90-odd% that never report abuse to police. I think that simply isn't good enough that we leave them on their own.
Thanks, Lachlan.
I think for me, obviously, like the easy answer is more housing, which would be like great and all. But I think also like wraparound support is really important for the young person, and changing perceptions, whether it's your own perceptions or whether it's people that you see out there, just changing and challenging perceptions of what you believe a homeless person to look like. Because we know particularly with young people, it's often this idea of like hidden homelessness where they're likely to not just be like on the streets, or even if they are, challenging what you may believe to be true about what that person might have gone through. It's really important.
Thanks, Sienna.
Thank you. Change for me would mean listening to victims and making sure that perpetrators are actually getting and receiving some consequences, and that victims are able to see and realize this has happened, and also understanding that everybody's story is different and you never know what's happening behind someone's clothes.
Thanks, Holly.
I think change for me looks like understanding that we're all different. We all bring something uniquely wonderful to the table, and acknowledging that that's a strength and not a weakness, that our differences are what makes us special and what makes the world run, essentially. And knowing that that type of information is spread throughout our schools, in respectful relationships classes, in consent education, in these really vital topics that I feel are not as covered in depth as physics or maths, but are more important.
Thanks, Raghu.
On the point of social housing, I speak in the idealistic world, of course, like many young people do speak about. But I find it quite shameful and upsetting often when we talk about social housing and its availability to family domestic violence survivors, because of course there's a sort of criteria that a person might have to fill out or sort of check boxes in to have access to this social and domestic housing. And I think it's quite upsetting to know that if you haven't experienced enough abuse, or it's not physical enough, or it's not for this amount of period of time, and if you don't have a safe space to go to, unfortunately I end up in these situations where you don't don't have a safe space to go to, especially for children and young people. So I think we need to have a more compassionate and holistic approach to how we address victim survivors and sort of where they can go after experiencing abuse, a safe space where they don't have to feel like, they haven't experienced enough, haven't checked those boxes to receive that support that they deserve.
Thanks, Abby. Another question here. How do we safely engage with young people in decision-making processes? Do you want to go, Lachlan?
I'm going to start us off with paying people.
Thanks, Lachlan. That's a good answer.
I think continue doing what you're doing. I mean, you're all here today to listen to us and to listen to other experts, and to see young people as experts, I think, is really important because, like Amber said at the start, we don't have a degree or anything like that, but we are experts in our experience. I also want to acknowledge that I think it's really important to actively reach out to a variety of different groups of young people. Obviously, we're all very privileged to be here today, but we are not the only voice for young people in South Australia or for Australia. So always being willing to actively reach out to people rather than waiting for them to reach out to you is crucial.
Thanks, Sienna.
I think when we're trying to meet with young people and make sure that a wide variety of voices are being shared, we need to be also thinking about what times they're being at, because often I've got a mad dash after school, or I'm leaving school early, or I'm not attending school and my education's getting at risk because I'm going to these events. I find that can often come up. And then other events just don't get advertised on social media, and then they wonder why no children, teenagers, show up. Obviously, it's going to be different with the social media ban going up. But when children and teenagers so heavily use it, and none of events that are marketed towards us are getting marketed on a platform that we use so regularly, it's bound for us to not show up because we don't know about it.
Thanks, Holly.
I think adding on to what Lachlan said, payment is a recognition that lived experience is not free labor. I would argue that lived experience is inherently more unique than a university degree, and I would argue more valuable. But also, paying us means that we know our voice isn't tokenistic. We aren't just here to tick off a box. We aren't just here for a media opportunity or to be posted on social media. We are here because we have information that you want. We have feedback that we can give. We have something we can provide, and that is a long way to go. Another thing is we cannot place the immense pressure and responsibilities of being the youth representative for millions of young people across the country on a single young person. Young people aren't monoliths, and they've got individual experiences. So making sure that there's a wide range of voices at the table as well is a really important step in making sure we feel safe at that table.
Thanks, Raghu.
I'll just touch on mandatory reporting. Lachlan, of course, talked about how 99% of men and I think around 82% of women didn't report instances of FDSV and other forms of violence against children. And I myself and I find that lots of my friends, they find it quite stigmatized to report these instances when, for example, if they were to come up on the stage and speak about their experiences. Of course, I understand that many of you as mandatory reporters would have to, for safety reasons, to report these things to higher bodies to make sure that these young people are safe. But I think I don't have the solution myself, but I think there needs to be some way to help make these young people feel safe and supported enough so that they can, really share their experiences with decision makers and not feel stigmatized and felt as though they'll be vilified and, not punished, but some action will be taken that if they do share their experience, they will be reported for, because for their own safety as such. But I think there just needs to be some sort of change in the mindset around that reporting. Otherwise, students just unfortunately won't come to people they trust to report these experiences, which is why we're seeing such high rates of children and young people not reporting their FDSV. So I think just a mindset shift there would be good.
Thanks, Abby. And just in the last minute, a response from all of you about what does an ideal world look like around child safety and child protection.
I think just very simply that we're safe. I think that's the easy answer. I think it's one where children feel comfortable in schools, in particular, in the parks, out on shops. I know that I often feel safe, but I know that a lot of people around me don't. Some just say it's because I'm ignorant, but I think the complexities of these things does make it very difficult to do that, but just increasing confidence.
Thanks, Lachlan.
I think building awareness on different options for young people is really important, and for young people to actually have those options, so knowing that they have different support networks and different systems if they were to need to rely on them. I think that's really important.
Thanks, Sienna.
For me, it would be consulting children and a wide variety of them when coming and making legislation surrounding child safety, and making sure that we are a part of the conversation involving our safety, because in the end, it's us who know the most about what it feels like to be in danger as a child.
Thanks, Holly.
I think for me personally, I touched on this earlier, but it's a space where everyone can feel the right to express themselves. It's a world where I didn't have to shorten my name when I came to Australia. It's a world where both adults and children won't be afraid that they'll get disease if they touch my skin. It's a world that I don't notice people crossing the road, pulling their children to the side, or clutching their bags as I walk past.
Thanks, Raghu.
I think in an ideal world, I just wish, when I was at school, I wish there was just a single day where I didn't have a friend, a really close friend, telling me that, I can't catch the bus home that late. I can't hang out with you because I can't catch public transport after 6 o'clock, or, I can't go home that late. My father and mother will get, really upset. And I wish there was, a day at school where I could just feel relaxed and comfortable with all my friends and not have these stories and these really upsetting things told to me about, some really simple things that I take for granted in my life, such as being able to come home from a get-together at 9 o'clock and catch the public bus home, when I have lots of people telling me that they've had very upsetting and horrible experiences in these places. I wish that was just, these really basic things that some people might take for granted, that these children and young people are able to feel safe and supported in these spaces.
Thanks, Abinav. And thank you all so much. Can we give them all a round of applause?